Hello, this is Angelia, and you are watching or listening to the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about raising grandchildren. More and more grandparents are having to raise the grandchildren, because of drugs, alcohol, criminal behavior, unfortunately, job problems where the parents have to go out of town to find a job. So we're going to take back up on that. Most grandparents who take on the responsibility to raise their grandchildren do it because they love the grandchildren and do not want them placed in a stranger's foster home. Because there's so many horror stories. And that's the way my grandfather tricked me into putting up with what he was doing to me, is because he said, if my grandmother and mother found out, they would be jealous, and they would have to put me in a foster home where people get killed all the time. So I was scared that was the lesser of two evils, because I didn't want to go get killed. But in reality, that doesn't usually happen. So, but most grandparents aren't going to stand by and watch their kid get put in foster care. However, the age difference can become a barrier, and both generations may feel cheated out of their traditional roles. Because grandparents, expect to retire and have time to travel and things, and then come back and see the grandkids and things. So, they may not really want to take on the grandkids, but they might feel like they have to. At the same time, grandparents often have to deal not only with a sense of guilt because the adult children they raise have failed their own children, but with the rancor they feel towards the adult child. So, they feel bad that the poor grandkid is left, but they're also mad at the parent because, hey, I did my job with you. Why aren't you doing your job with this kid? For some caregiver couples, the strains produce tension in their own relationship. And I have heard of that. I have heard of situations where grandma and grandpa don't stay together. Grandpa hits the road. Excuse me. If one or both parents later resume their normal roles, it may be emotionally wrenching to return the child. And I've heard of that too, where someone has been in rehab or something and then comes back and wants the kid, and then the grandparents might fight and say, no, I took this kid on. I'm raising this kid. You aren't fit to raise this kid. So there can be drama in families over that. Grandparents providing kinship care who do not become foster parents or gain custody have no legal status and no more right than unpaid babysitters. They may face many practical problems, from enrolling the child in school and gaining access to academic records to obtaining medical insurance for the child. Because if they're not the legal guardian, a lot of schools, legal guardian or parent, they don't include grandparent in that. Grandchildren are usually not eligible for coverage under employer-provided health insurance, even if the grandparent has custody. So unless they have specific family insurance, they might not be covered. Like working parents, working grandparents need good, affordable child care and family-friendly workplace policies, such as time off to care for a sick child. It's not as uncommon today as it used to be, so more and more companies are, doing paid leave and things. The Federal Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993 does cover grandparents who are raising grandchildren, but many do not realize it. So you just got told that if you didn't realize it. Grandparents can be sources of guidance, companions in play, links to the past, and symbols of family continuity. So grandparents do play an important part in a child's life. They express generativity, a longing to transcend mortality by investing themselves in the lives of future generations. Men and women who do not become grandparents may fulfill generative needs by becoming foster grandparents or volunteering in schools or hospitals. By finding ways to develop what Erickson called the virtue of care, adults prepare themselves to enter the culminating period of adult development. And yes, remember we said you are still developing as an adult. So, this is, it's only too late on the day you wake up dead. So, at 65 is the traditional entrance point for late adulthood. And it's certainly, not across the board for everybody. It's a case-by-case basis. Some people age quicker. Some people age slower. It's just depending. The last phase of life. Yet many adults at 65 or even 75 or 85 do not feel or act old. Individual differences become more pronounced in the later years, and use it or lose it becomes an urgent mandate, because that is true. You got to keep things going and going, if you want to keep them going. Most older adults enjoy good physical and mental health. People who keep physically and intellectually active can hold their own in most respects and even grow in competence. Physical and cognitive functioning, in turn, have psychosocial effects, often determining an older person's emotional state and whether he or she can live independently. Like I say, that's something we're going through now with my mother-in-law, because she's falling, and we think it's time that she has a different arrangement, but she's not on board with that, so we're having some drama. Why not look at these new years of life in terms of continued or new roles in society, another stage in personal or even spiritual growth and development? And that's by Betty Friedan, The Fountain of Age, 1993. Okay, now we're going to look at John Glenn, the space pioneer. I think we all remember John Glenn. Most of us should anyway. If you don't know who John Glenn is, Google it, take a look. When John H. Glenn Jr. blasted off from the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral on October 29, 1998, as a payload specialist on the Shuttle Discovery, he became a space pioneer for the second time. In 1962, at the age of 40, Glenn had been the first American to orbit the Earth. So now you know who he was. What made him a pioneer in 1998, when the next donned the orange jumpsuit, was that he was 77 years old, or young, depending on how you want to look at it. The oldest person ever to go into outer space. Throughout his adult life, Glenn has won medals and set records. As a fighter pilot during the Korean War, he earned 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses. In 1957, he made the first cross-country supersonic jet flight. So, he's the guy who did that. In 1962, when his Friendship 7 one-man space capsule circled the globe 3 times in less than 5 hours, he instantly became a national hero. Glenn was elected a U.S. Senator from Ohio in 1974 and served 4 terms. As a member of the Senate Special Committee on Aging, his interest in the subject of aging prompted him to offer himself as a human guinea pig on the 9-day Discovery mission. So he volunteered for that. As Glenn discovered while browsing through a medical textbook, the zero-gravity conditions of spaceflight mimic at accelerated speed what normally happens to the body as it ages. So if you're out there in zero grav, you start to waste away your muscles and everything, because, you're not having to do any work. You're just floating around. Thus, Glenn reasoned sending an older man into space might give scientists a thumbnail glimpse of processes of aging. By studying how weightlessness affected Glenn's bones, muscles, blood pressure, heart rate, balance, immune system, and sleep cycles, as well as his ability to bounce back after the flight, as compared with younger astronauts, medical researchers could obtain information that might ultimately have broader applications. So, that way they could figure out what happens as we age and how can we put a stop to some of it. The data would not, of course, provide conclusive findings, but, as in any good case study, could generate hypotheses to be tested by further research with larger groups of participants. The flight also would have an important side effect: to demolish common stereotypes about aging. And, a lot of people say you're only as old as you feel. And I don't want that because, some days I feel really old. Space travel, is a challenge even for the youngest and most physically fit adults. Not everyone can be an astronaut. Candidates have to pass stringent physical and mental tests. Because of his age, Glenn was held to even tougher physical standards. An avid weightlifter and power walker, he was in superb physical condition, so I imagine that was helpful. He passed the examinations with flying colors and then spent nearly 500 hours in training. So I imagine a lot of us at 77 probably wouldn't be interested in that, but, he wanted to do it, and it's good that he did it. It was a clear, cloudless October day when, after 2 suspenseful delays, the shuttle Discovery lifted off with what the countdown commentator called a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend. 3 hours and 10 minutes later, 342 miles above Hawaii, a beaming Glenn repeated his own historic words broadcast 36 years before. 0G, and I feel fine. On November 7th, Discovery touched down at Cape Canaveral, and John Glenn, though weak and wobbly, walked out of the shuttle on his own 2 feet. Within 4 days, he had fully recovered his balance and was completely back to normal. Glenn's achievement proved that, at 77, he still had the right stuff. His heroic exploit captured public imagination around the world. As Stephen J. Cutler, president of the Gerontological Society of America, put it, "It's hard to imagine a better demonstration of the capabilities of older persons and of the productive contributions they can make." And it's true. Just don't feel like you have to just sit there and do nothing because you're old. You can do whatever you want to do still, as long as you can do it. John Glenn epitomizes a new view on aging, challenging the formerly pervasive picture of old age as a time of inevitable physical and mental decline. On the whole, people today are living longer and better than at any time in history. So, that's something that you have to think about. They always say 30 is, 50 is the new 30, and, stuff like that. And, that's kind of true. Because back in Daniel Boone's day, they might be living to be 30 some odd years old. And now we're, in general, usually living up into our 80s. And there's some people who live up into their hundreds. And it's like I tell my husband whenever we start talking about death and things, and I'm like, well, God says the years of man are 120, so until he tells me different, I'm going to just plan on living that long. In the United States, older adults as a group are healthier, more numerous, and younger at heart than ever before. With improved health habits and medical care, it is becoming harder to draw the line between the end of middle adulthood and the beginning of late adulthood. Many 70-year-olds act, think, and feel much as 50-year-olds did a decade or 2 ago. So, again, you're really only old when you're old. If you think you're old, you might be old. And if you don't think you're so old and you're still just doing your thing, you might not age as fast as someone who's kind of given up and sits back. I'm old. I'm not doing anything. And there you go. That's what you are then. And that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope this helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. Until next time.